that's a topic I think we will have to spend more time talking about and breaking down
especially the next 4 years.
because this is going to run for a while, and we need to know what we're up against in this and how might we respond in lots of ways. And we know what the symptoms are, so let's take a look at the symptoms. What do you see, and then how might you respond? I think it might be worthwhile we do that.
Well, if we talked about if there was dealing with the narcissist at the holiday dinner table, if we began there, the first step is, there are several steps, but for me, I think the most important is to be able to, if you can, mentalize the quote narcissist, because narcissists don't just narcissist on out of the blue. There is
noun and a verb or something like that happened.
They are responding to a narcissistic injury. There is, and it is typically misperceived, but sometimes it is perceived. So the goal is, if you're going to deal with somebody who is experiencing narcissistic traits, if you could find their heartbeat, it makes it a little easier to be able to navigate them. It makes it first easier to tolerate them, and then it may allow you to have some choices, to be tactical in how you might navigate them at the table. So, for instance, the typical thing from someone who may be narcissistic at the dinner table is they might start by being very, they may inflate themselves, and they may talk about how great their year was and how much money they made,
right,
and how beautiful this is, or whatever the case may be. It may start there, right?
That sounds like a typical type conversation that might happen, or a monologue that might happen at the table.
And part of what happens when you find someone's heartbeat, that's called mentalizing in my end of the thing, is that you can, if some people can talk about the wonderful things that have happened to them, and it doesn't irk you. There are people who can talk about how lucky they are to have had these wonderful things happen, and you can feel good for them, right?
Right.
It's not that inflation. It is not that attempt by the narcissist to repair themselves by getting you to become a self-object. You're supposed to worship at their altar, because in the act of worshiping them, you repair temporarily the cracks that they walked into the room with.
Right.
And
very
so,
important.
right, and if you can, when someone is doing this inflation, narcissistic inflation, when they do that, you are, you can feel how irksome it is, and it may make it a lot harder for you not to either internally or externally react in a reflexive reaction instead of a calculated response, right?
Right.
We're talking about the navigating the narcissist across from you, right? And the idea of finding the heartbeat first, so that's the first thing.
Right.
Because if I'm working with, and I have a couple of folks I'm working with now who have narcissistic organizations, I would say that they meet the criteria for narcissistic personality.
That's a nice phrase, by the way.
Yeah, and that's a way of maybe humanizing it, because you can think of a narcissistic character structure. All of us have to come up with an unconscious plan and map for navigating the world.
Got it.
And narcissistic organizations are just one of those sorts of maps. They don't.
Right.
Someone can't be reduced to just this. But this is one of the ways they navigate the world. And so if you can begin from that and say, okay, this is, there's a good chance that even the folks that we know who are organized narcissistically, if they're not under stress, they may be very normal. Yeah. They may be empathic. You may feel connected to them.
Yeah, charming
right.
to an extent, yes.
But under stress,
engaging.
Right.
Yep.
Are you talking about me?
No, I am. Well,
no.
Wait, give me a chance. All right, go ahead.
But when under stress, they experience a disequilibrium, an impingement, right. And so that character structure becomes foregrounded, and so suddenly they begin to pull from that narcissistic repertoire to be able to get themselves to feel okay and recalibrate and regenerate some equilibrium.
Right. So that's the bragging and talking about how wonderful their life is.
Right.
But it never seems to include the other person. I mean, yeah, if you do get those vibes that this person is really sort of grandiose and talking about themselves, but I'm not even in that picture. I'm sort of over here a little bit.
Well, there's a guy by the name of Heinz Kohut who was a psychoanalyst in the, I think he died in the 80s, I think. But he talks about how someone with a narcissistic character structure, they often want people to become self-objects, little mirrors that reflect back parts of themselves so they can feel okay. So when that person is bragging, they want you to be in awe of them.
Right.
And they want you to reflect that back so they'll feel okay. Right? And if we were to replay it, let's say that, there's a good chance that there is an impingement that you don't notice that's generated this disequilibrium in the narcissistic individual. It could be the mere fact that they're gathered around a table with folks that they're somehow intimidated by, or there is something about the current situation that makes them feel less secure, that raises their anxiety. And if they're organized differently, and there are different personality structures that can, and if you had a borderline personality structure, for instance, you might suddenly feel, I suck, everything's horrible, everybody's better than me, whatever. So it would swing the other way, right?
Right.
But the narcissistic individual does the opposite. They need to be number one in the room desperately so that they can feel okay about themselves, right? And if you truly can mentalize the individual, then it may be a kind thing to let them inflate. Let them talk about how great things are, nod and smile, how great. And then once that happens, they may be okay enough to be able to navigate the dinner differently as a result of your reflection and mirroring. In fact, part of what Kohut said when you're treating narcissistic individuals is initially you should mirror. You should try to reflect back maybe initially the things they want reflected back. Man, you've got a great life. This is wonderful. And then over time in the course of treatment, you can begin to reflect back what's underneath it, slowly but surely. You know? Man, you got a wonderful life, but I know that you're
it's
worried.
It's tough out there.
Yeah,
right.
but it is.
God,
that's wonderful. You got a wonderful life, but man, even a wonderful life, things can be tough, can't they? And it just sort of, till you slowly but surely get to what that primary emotional or primary concern is that's being sort of covered over by this secondary process. I think most people consider this, that there's probably a constitutional element, a genetic pull for folks to be have some difficulty with affect regulation, or they may even have an excessive amount of affect. There's some thoughts on that, but that our personality structures are formed very early. So if there is specific developmental trauma, or if there is some developmental context where a narcissistic personality structure is advantageous, or it's very adaptive to be able to have that, then you're going to pick it up and you're going to keep it. And the catch is, most folks who have a narcissistic character structure are usually organized at a neurotic level. I mean, a wonderful example of this would be someone like Bill Clinton. He is someone who, he has, and one of his gifts, again, supposedly, this would maybe a hearsay, but he could walk into a room and memorize everybody's name.
Right.
And then address you by your name.
And then,
right?
Yes.
And that's because someone with a narcissistic character structure, if they're organized at the right way, or they don't have, if they don't have the wrong impingements, they'll also lift you up. It feels good to be their self-object.
Right.
I'm in the presence of
There's
this
a
wonderful
benefit
person,
to you, yes,
and they're noticing me, right?
Yeah.
And so, and I think for lots of folks, even your Uncle Pete at the dinner table, probably you can also come up with a list of things about him that you really like. We want to clarify that this is a personality organization that is adaptive, and it typically only becomes problematic in moments of significant stress. Now, that's not true for everybody, because someone could, again, this is sort of a psychodynamic way of thinking about things, but you're organized at levels, and if you're organized at a neurotic level, that's relatively healthy. So under stress, it doesn't necessarily have to be a big deal.
Right.
But when you get lower down in that or level, and you get to, say, borderline or even psychotic, then it becomes highly problematic. And then we move into a place where we could, there's a version called phallic narcissism, which is kind of a sort of neurotic level, and that's somebody who is always inflating themselves. You could argue that our soon-to-be president might hover into that phallic narcissistic, because he's often saying all sorts of, it's the best, I've done the best, I've done the
Absolutely.
best. It's always the case.
No problems.
Yeah.
Everything's wonderful.
When you move further down that, you begin to generate what we call malignant narcissists. And malignant narcissists can often be very controlling of their self-objects. They can be even cruel and subversive in how they get people to move in their orbit in a way and keep them stuck. And those folks could be manipulative. They would be folks who, in relationships, would want to tear someone down and make them feel weak, so that they feel like they have to have the narcissistic individual.
Right. Yes.
And those are often, if you're dealing with that in therapy, for instance, someone who comes into the therapy setting, that's usually I'll deal with a spouse or a family member who's been hurt by this individual.
Sure.
And they'll come in and say, okay, and they'll often come in full of doubt. Part of what happens when we move further down that divide into the borderline level, not only are you wanting someone who you can hold on to as that self-object in a controlling manner, you also may need to take the things from you that you don't like and put them in them through projective identification.
Okay.
So I need, instead of me feeling weak, I need someone else to feel this. Instead of, and this can be very poisonous to the relationship, and the individual who has survived a relationship with someone like this often comes into therapy feeling broken, feeling as if they've been the container for poison, and they've been poisoned. Part of what I liked about Heinz Kohut is he said that all of us have the self by its very nature is a narcissistic structure, and we have to find some way to manage our self state. And that is, all of us have a narcissistic equilibrium we have to hold on to, we have to keep up.
Yep.
So you can do the same thing. It may not be as extreme as the individual has a true narcissistic character structure. We want to be able to see the humanity in yourself and the people across the table. And in doing so, I think it's much easier for us to come together in a place of love and connection. Even those family members who are more difficult, you may find that if there was a little more compassion, that some of the more problematic people in your family would be less problematic.
Okay.